In late June of 2023, Larry Fink publicly backed away from the term ESG. He knew it had developed a negative connotation. However, BlackRock did not cease using environmental social governance as a tool to shape public policy through corporate administration. Another moniker, Sustainable and Transition Investing, seeks to establish the same goal as ESG: the exchange of government of the people, for the people, and by the people for total corporate control of the global economy. I think it's important to re-release this video at this time in order to help people continue to understand the threat to democracy and economic freedom posed by none other than large institutional investment firms like BlackRock.
Behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. 54% of the incoming class are women. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year, and what we're doing internally is, if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
we're doing the same thing.
And so it's just you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted.
This is the story of how the private equity firm BlackRock is using your money, yes, your money, to establish a corporate global governance structure with BlackRock at the head. This system has as its ultimate goal controlling every aspect of your life, from where you live, what you eat, what opportunities you can have, and who you should vote for. If he's successful, history will remember BlackRock's CEO, Larry Fink, as a new breed of conqueror, one that Alexander of Macedonia, the conquistadors, and Genghis Khan would be envious of. In order to pursue an agenda of world domination, you have to be insane or have a tremendous amount of money and power. BlackRock has more money under management than the annual budgets of the European Union, China, and the United States combined. In fact, as of mid-2023, BlackRock has an astonishing $9 trillion under management. But how did they accomplish that? Hang on, we'll get there. When it comes to raw influence, BlackRock is more powerful than the United States Congress. They give millions of dollars annually to congressional PACs, campaigns, and national committees. Both Democrats and Republicans have been the beneficiaries of BlackRock money. So if you think you, as an individual voter, hold any sway over how your elected representatives vote, I've got a bridge to sell you. BlackRock's board consists of an international coven of corporate leaders spanning every important industry from communications, high finance, academia, to consumer goods. The company's C-suite is a who's who of finance industry luminaries with resumes and Rolodexes that would choke a horse. To say the company is connected would be a monumental understatement. In fact, Larry Fink has a direct line to presidents, kings, and prime ministers. Back in 2020, he met personally with Volodymyr Zelensky to discuss investing in the rebuilding of Ukraine. In 2021, Fed Chair Jerome Powell reached out to Fink to discuss staving off a U.S. financial collapse. But things weren't always so rosy for Larry Fink. Fresh out of UCLA, Fink hit Wall Street at the tender age of 23. Landing at First Boston as a bond trader, within 10 years, he had made a name for himself in the debt securitization market, separating bundled loans and then reselling those loans to investors. At the time, these collateralized debt instruments were a cutting-edge financial idea. They'd become infamous when they wound up at the heart of the 2008 Great Recession. But for now, Larry was riding high. By the time he hit his early 30s, he'd been promoted to the position of managing partner at First Boston, the youngest in the history of the company. And although he'd added about $1 billion to First Boston's assets, not too long after that, he racked up a staggering $100 million loss for the company. And in the biggest case of what have you done for me lately, Fink was shown the door. His reputation had gone from hero to zero in no time. Past colleagues and allies started backing away. Boy, would they come to regret that. Despite these challenges, like most people who win for a living, Larry moved on, undaunted, resolving to let this career tragedy be a lesson instead of his final epitaph. By his mid-30s, he co-founded the Blackstone Group alongside partner Stephen Schwartzman. Together, they turned a $5 million line of credit into $20 billion under management in just 6 short years. But in a tale as old as time itself, two alpha dogs could not exist in the same yard forever. So Larry Fink separated from Blackstone and created BlackRock. In 1998, BlackRock would become a publicly traded company worth $375 million. By 2004, it had acquired Merrill Lynch, and as we noted earlier, as of mid-2023, the company was sitting on $9 trillion of assets under management. Fink is incredibly adept at identifying the opportunities in every challenge. In 2020, BlackRock saw an opportunity to link its worldview with its investment objectives. It arbitrarily and unilaterally announced that corporations should serve a social purpose, and that to enforce this notion, BlackRock would start issuing scores to companies to indicate how closely that company adhered to BlackRock's vision and values.
I'm Joe Lonsdale. I'm an entrepreneur and investor. I've founded several large companies, including Palantir and Adapar.
ESG is kind of today being sold as all things to all people, right? It's this ticket to magical, better returns in your portfolio. It's also going to create all this great impact and solve our social challenges.
But in practice, what happens, like anything else, is ESG is a form of power. And the people who have captured ESG frameworks in our country, which tend to be on the left, would use that glow to give them more credit. So basically, all of a sudden, a company which clearly has terrible governance and which is very, very questionable what its positive impact on the world is, basically a Ponzi scheme, gets to be rated more highly than companies running our energy sector, because the energy sector is disfavored with Democrats and disfavored with the left. But this virtue signaling Democratic donor is favored with the left. So the whole framework of ESG becomes sort of a joke. The ESG is completely perverted. And yes, this is what all these companies do. If you're in a marketing department in the Fortune 500, if you're trying to get pensions to give you money, if you're going to just virtue signal all the things that the lefty pensions, the people running the pensions who tend to be tied to government unions want to hear. And so a huge part of our corporate world, a huge part of the Fortune 500 is virtue signaling to try to get free resources, to try to get basically rewarded based on the fact that a lot of institutions are now captured by these ESG frameworks.
Companies that committed to hiring practices with a high degree of diversity and inclusion, no matter whether the best person for the job was hired or not, or manufacturing using green technology, regardless of whether or not that added cost to the project, were given higher scores than companies that did not adhere to such standards. Knowing this, it became clear why Budweiser risked it all on a so-called diversity ad. You may be asking, why do these companies listen to what BlackRock has to say? Well, that's because BlackRock owns healthy amounts of the company's stock. And they also have a tremendous amount of influence on all of the corporate boards of these companies. For example, even though BlackRock only owns 8% of the pharmaceutical giant Merck, you can bet your bottom dollar they hold even more sway over the company through relationships with board members, like former 3M executive Ing Thulin. 3M is another company BlackRock has an interest in. BlackRock owns precisely 7.3% of 3M. These types of cross-pollinated relationships abound for BlackRock, and there's absolutely nothing at all incestuous or unethical about it. Wink, wink, right? Your next question might be, how did BlackRock get all this money to buy up such influential amounts of shares in all of these powerful companies? Well, that's where you come in. Remember that $9 trillion under management? That's your money. Well, part of it anyway. If you have a public or private pension or defined contribution plan like a 401k or an IRA, it's likely BlackRock manages it. 35 million Americans either contribute to these BlackRock managed funds directly or have an employer contribute on their behalf. Larry Fink plans to create a world in his image using other people's money, namely yours. Genius and terrifying, all at the same time. Does ESG investing work? Can all these retirees trust that ESG will help companies perform well enough to ensure they have a decent retirement? Well, the jury is still out, but to be honest, the early returns are not inspiring. According to a December 2022 report by Bloomberg, the 10 largest ESG funds by assets all posted double-digit losses, with 8 of them underperforming the S&P 500. Is it possible that focusing more on esoteric social benchmarks as opposed to solid business fundamentals, like say revenue growth, expense reduction, new product introduction, or management effectiveness, will result in superior economic performance for retirees? Or has Larry Fink suffered a loss of business objectivity that will eventually result in retirees not having as much money as they thought they would? One thing is for sure, BlackRock's brand of ESG is driving corporations to try and modify consumer behavior. From Budweiser's marketing fiasco to JP Morgan's CEO Jamie Dimon actually suggesting government and corporations team up to take private property, in the name of climate change, of course, to major social media companies working with 3-letter agencies to stifle conservative narratives. This is all rewarded with a higher ESG score from BlackRock. So really, the plan isn't to drive revenues so much as it is to drive societal conduct. Larry Fink and BlackRock are what happens when a corporation becomes, in many ways, more powerful than a government. Unfettered by notions of accountability, you can't vote Larry out of office. He's free to use your money to fund a worldview that may not be compatible with maximizing shareholder value. But when you're sitting on top of $9 trillion and can decide the fate of companies and heads of state, who cares?